You know, there are some stories that just get under your skin and stay there.
Oh, definitely.
For me, the Dyatlov Pass incident is absolutely one of those. It's just
Yeah, it really is.
9 very experienced hikers, right? Out in the Ural Mountains, February 1959, a brutal blizzard.
And then the campsite they find.
Yeah.
It's like nothing else. Completely ravaged by who knows what.
Exactly. Inexplicable.
It's a deeply unsettling case, yeah. And the details from that first search party, genuinely disturbing.
Tell me about it.
We're talking about injuries that are they don't make sense. Crushed ribs, fractured skulls, but maybe not much external trauma.
And the missing eyes, tongues.
Yeah, missing eyes, tongues ripped out. It's horrific stuff. And then layered on top, you have these traces of radiation found later on some of the clothes.
It just pushes it way beyond, a typical wilderness accident.
Way beyond.
And that initial Soviet report, the official line was an unknown compelling force.
Right. Which sounds incredibly vague, doesn't it?
It almost feels like they were trying not to say something, like they knew more or suspected something far more, disturbing.
Could be. Or maybe they just didn't know. But let's back up. The people involved. This group.
Yeah, good point. These weren't rookies. Not at all.
No, precisely. This was a team of 9 seasoned Soviet hikers. The leader was Igor Dyatlov. He was, 23?
Young, yeah, but an engineering student with a lot of experience in these tough winter treks.
Serious experience. And they were tackling a big one, a 300-kilometer trek. Their goal was Otorten Peak.
Otorten Peak, and you know what that means in the local Mansi language, right?
I do. Don't go there.
Don't go there. It's like this primal warning just hanging over the whole thing from the very beginning.
Gives you chills a bit.
It does. And they were prepared. They had the gear, the skills, which just makes what happened next even more baffling.
Totally. So their last known spot was the campsite they set up, February 1st, 1959.
On the slopes of Kholat Shai.
Which, adding another layer of, I guess, grim coincidence, translates from Mansi as Mountain of the Dead.
Seriously.
Seriously. So Mountain of the Dead, that's the last place we know for sure they were alive, setting up camp.
And then the discovery. That's where it all just unravels into strangeness.
Yeah.
The tent tells such a story, doesn't it? Slashed open.
From the inside.
From the inside. Think about that. What level of sheer terror makes experienced mountaineers rip open their only shelter?
In minus 30 degrees Celsius conditions.
Yeah.
Minus 22 Fahrenheit.
And just flee. Into the dark. Many of them weren't even properly dressed. No shoes, some of them.
What triggers that? Such a desperate, panicked reaction. Was it something outside, like, an avalanche? Animal?
Or something terrifying inside the tent with them.
It just suggests this sudden, overwhelming threat, something immediate.
And where they found the bodies. That just adds more questions.
Right. The first 2, they were found near an old cedar tree, quite a distance from the tent.
And they were just in their underwear. Just underwear.
Mm-hmm.
And their hands, signs they desperately tried to climb that tree, maybe trying to see something or escape something on the ground.
But they clearly died of hypothermia, just frozen solid. It's a horrible picture. Frantic escape, desperate survival attempt, then just succumbing to the cold.
A truly awful way to go.
Yeah.
Then there were the next 3.
Found scattered between the tent and that tree, right? Sort of leading back towards the camp.
Yeah, and they were frozen too, obviously. But they had these horrific internal injuries.
That's the really bizarre part. Crushed ribs, fractured skulls.
Like they'd been hit by a truck, but maybe without the obvious external signs you'd expect, immense force.
And Lyudmila Dubinina. Her injuries are particularly gruesome.
They are. Missing eyes, tongue, part of her lips gone.
How does that happen? What kind of force does that kind of specific brutal damage? It doesn't sound like just falling or being crushed randomly.
It's incredibly hard to square with, normal kinds of trauma. Falling in the snow, even rocks. It doesn't usually result in that.
No. And then the last group.
The final 4. They weren't found for months until the snow thawed a bit. May.
Buried deep, weren't they? Under like 4 meters of snow in a ravine.
Yeah, quite deep. And their discovery added yet another really strange element.
The radiation.
The radiation.
Yeah.
Traces of it detected on some of their clothing.
Okay, so now you've got radiation involved. That just blows any simple explanation right out of the water, doesn't it?
Pretty much. It forces you to think about,
Right.
less ordinary things.
Right. So those initial Soviet explanations people talk about, avalanche, infrasound panic, animal attack, they all start to look pretty shaky when you pile up all the evidence.
They really do. Let's look at the avalanche idea first. It's the one the Russians eventually came back to. officially.
But it has problems, right?
Big problems. I mean, first off, the slope they camped on, it wasn't that steep. Not typical avalanche terrain.
Okay.
There wasn't a big debris field, piles of snow and ice like you'd expect.
And the tent was still standing. Sort of.
Exactly. It was damaged, cut open, but largely standing. An avalanche powerful enough to cause those internal crushing injuries. You'd think it would have just flattened everything, swept it all away.
Yeah, that doesn't add up. Okay, what about infrasound? This idea of low-frequency sound causing panic.
That's an interesting theory. Infrasound sound below human hearing range can supposedly cause feelings of unease, dread, maybe even panic at very high intensities.
So maybe that explains why they fled the tent in terror.
It might explain the panic, but the physical trauma, the crushed chests and skulls, infrasound doesn't do that.
That radiation.
Definitely doesn't explain the radiation. So it only maybe answers one small piece of the puzzle, if that.
Okay, theory 3, animal attack.
Well, wild animals are certainly out there, bears, wolves.
Right.
But no animal tracks were reported around the tent or the bodies. None.
That's a big one.
Huge. And while animals might scavenge bodies after death, the specific injuries like the eyes and tongue were moved from Dubinina, but not, say, widespread bite marks or mauling. It's weird.
Yeah.
It doesn't really fit a typical predator attack pattern.
Especially not one that would drive 9 people out of a tent like that. You'd expect signs of a struggle, tracks everywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It just seems unlikely as the primary cause. It feels more like something targeted or just unusual.
So the standard explanations all have pretty major holes.
They do, which is why this case keeps fascinating people and why it leads us down paths towards, well, some darker, more speculative theories.
Yeah, let's get into those. The ones that go beyond nature, like maybe secret military stuff.
That's definitely one of the big ones. Given the inconsistencies, you have to consider human factors, even sinister ones.
The Soviet military, I mean, it was a Cold War. Lots of secrecy.
And that area around Dyatlov Pass, it wasn't exactly a public park. Access was restricted sometimes.
Right. And there were those local reports, weren't there? People seeing strange lights.
Orange glowing spheres in the sky around the time of the incident, reported by locals, even other hikers in the region.
And we know from declassified files later that the Soviets were doing missile tests, maybe even experimental weapon tests in the Urals generally.
So the question becomes, did these hikers stumble onto something they shouldn't have seen? Were they accidental victims of some kind of test? Maybe a radioactive weapon?
Could that explain the radiation? And some sources mention the bodies having a strange orange tan or hue. Could that be related to radiation or chemicals?
It's a chilling possibility. The orange skin is debated, not universally documented in the official reports, but it pops up in some accounts. A weapon test gone wrong, followed by a cover-up. It fits some of the pieces.
Okay, that's one dark path. What about something not human? UFOs? Extraterrestrials?
Well, if you're looking for something that could exert massive force without necessarily leaving conventional marks, some researchers go there.
Because of the internal injuries, like some kind of pressure wave or focused energy?
Possibly. They point to the internal trauma, suggesting maybe a force field or the effect of a nearby craft's propulsion system. Pure speculation, of course.
And didn't one of the hikers' cameras have a weird last photo?
Yeah, the so-called frame 34. It shows some strange light anomalies in the dark. Could be lens flare, a malfunction, or could it be something they saw? Something unworldly.
If they encountered some unknown technology, could that explain the trauma, the panic, maybe even the radiation?
Again, it's way out there.
Yeah.
But when the conventional explanations fail so badly, people start looking at the unconventional.
Forces you to broaden your thinking, definitely. Then there's the local angle, the Mansi legends.
Right. The indigenous Mansi people, their warnings about the mountain of the dead, about spirits that...
Don't go there.
Exactly. And there was that diary entry, wasn't there? One of the hikers wrote something about feeling watched or a sense of unease about the place.
Yeah, I think so. Like they felt something was off even before everything went wrong.
So could it be something supernatural? A curse? Spirits? It's impossible to prove, of course.
But it adds this whole other layer, doesn't it? A psychological dread, a connection to the land's own stories.
It does. It speaks to that sense of unease that seems to permeate the whole incident.
Okay, strap in for this next one. Soviet Yeti experiments.
Ah, yes. That one is, well, it's probably the most outlandish.
But there's a tiny grain of weird fact behind it, isn't there? CIA files.
There are, strangely enough. Declassified CIA files do mention Soviet interest in investigating the Yeti, or abominable snowman, including trying to get DNA samples back in that era. Fringe science, Cold War paranoia.
So the theory goes, maybe the Soviets weren't just looking for Yetis, maybe they were trying to create or control something, and this creature attacked the hikers.
And the massive cover-up afterwards would be to hide this incredibly bizarre and dangerous experiment.
Wow.
It sounds completely like Pulp Fiction, I know. But the fact that there was documented official interest, however strange, combined with the secrecy around Dyatlov, it gives the theory just enough of a hook for people to latch onto.
It's just wild. The range of possibilities here.
And then fast forward decades. 2019, Russia suddenly reopens the case.
Yeah. People thought, okay, finally, maybe some answers with modern tech, less secrecy.
And then, almost as quickly, they closed it again. The conclusion.
Avalanche. Back to the avalanche theory.
Despite all the issues we just talked about, it felt anticlimactic, suspicious even.
Why bother reopening it just to rubber stamp the old, flawed explanation?
Exactly. And then you get these leaked reports, unconfirmed but persistent, suggesting the 2019 investigators did find anomalies.
Like more radiation.
Unexplained high levels of radiation, yes. And apparently some strange metal fragments near where the bodies were found in the ravine. Stuff not mentioned in the final public report.
So if that's true, why wasn't it disclosed? What were they hiding, even in 2019?
That's the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? It fuels the idea of an ongoing cover-up, something the authorities still don't want known.
So the big questions just hang there. Why all the secrecy back then, and maybe even now? Why the inconsistencies? Why the attempt to push the avalanche theory when it doesn't seem to fit?
What really happened on Kholat Shackle that night?
Will we ever truly know?
It seems unlikely we'll get a single, definitive, universally accepted answer. The Dyatlov Pass incident just remains this potent, deeply disturbing enigma.
A reminder that maybe some things are unknowable or deliberately kept unknown.
9 people went up that mountain and met a terrifying end. And the full truth. It seems it died with them, or it's buried in an archive somewhere.
So after going through all of this, the facts, the theories, from the mundane to the absolutely wild, what stands out to you?
For me, it's the sheer combination of factors. The tent cut from inside, the specific weird injuries, the scattered bodies, the radiation. No single theory seems to neatly explain everything.
Yeah, that's what gets me too. You can poke holes in all of them. The avalanche doesn't fit the scene. The infrasound doesn't explain the injuries or radiation. Military tests don't easily explain the missing soft tissue. UFOs and Yetis, well, they're huge leaps.
It's like a puzzle where none of the pieces quite lock together properly. What part of it leaves you the most puzzled?
Honestly, the radiation combined with the internal trauma and the panicked flight, it feels like multiple unrelated weird things happening at once, unless they are related in some way we don't understand.
So the big question for everyone listening, I guess, what do you think happened? After hearing this deep dive, does one theory feel more plausible, even if it's strange?
Was it a military accident? A tragic encounter with something unknown? A bizarre natural phenomenon we don't grasp yet? Or something else entirely?
We genuinely love to hear your thoughts. What's your theory? Share it. Discuss it. Let's keep trying to piece together this enduring mystery.
Absolutely. And if you're drawn to these kinds of unsolved cases, these deep dives into the strange and unexplained, definitely stay tuned. We've got more to explore.